For many of you, this brand and this car might seem like a very outlandish proposition in the current automotive space. And if you're watching this video, you're probably from around Europe somewhere, and you're hearing about Chery for the first time. Now I know you might be thinking I'm saying the name of the brand wrong, but actually that's the way it's supposed to be said, because the sound you're making, it should resemble the way this brand's name is pronounced in Chinese. And in Chinese, this brand's name is very similar to the pronunciation of Chery, not cherry. A lot of people are saying cherry, but that's not correct in any way, because the name of the brand itself is missing an R in order to be called and pronounced Chery, and it's also missing an E to be pronounced Chery. But as it turns out, this whole naming thing happened because of an error in translation, because the brand's name in English was supposed to be Chery with two E's. However, there was an error in translation and it ended up being written as you see it on this car. So yes, this is a Chery Tiggo 7. What is it? Well, if you've seen my video of the Tiggo 8, this is its smaller, younger brother. It's a C-segment, it's a compact crossover. That's a bit smaller than the Tiggo 8, which comes as standard with 7 seats. So it does need those extra 17 centimeters of length and a bit more in the wheelbase. To be more precise, this is a 4,553 millimeter long car with a wheelbase of 2 meters 68. So dead right in the compact segment. What does that mean exactly? It means it rivals cars like the Kia Sportage or the Hyundai Tucson or the Volkswagen Tiguan, or maybe the Toyota Corolla Cross, you know, those kinds of cars, that segment right there. So today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about it, its specs, what kind of engines you get on it, the technical side of things, the interior, and we're going to drive it, and I'm going to give you some real life fuel consumption figures. So you might want to stick around. Now, getting back to the car, I think the design of it is actually pretty European, and I'm starting to see that on a number of Chinese cars. Now, a lot of people still have a lot of preconceptions about these cars, because in the past, the Chinese cars that made it over here in Europe weren't exactly great, right? Most of them had safety issues, the design was a bit off, and so on and so forth. But the Chinese stuck to their guns, they learned a lot, they hired European designers, they are working with European car parts providers, and they are creating cars that are increasingly better in every single way. Now, in terms of design, because we're still on the outside part of the thing, this actually looks pretty good in my book. I think the headlamps do resemble the BMW X3 a bit in terms of the shape of the DRLs, but overall I think this car actually looks pretty good. Compared to the Tiggo 8 I presented earlier, the grille up front is completely blocked in this car, which might seem a bit odd at first. It might make you think that this is an electric car, but it's not. And I think it actually looks pretty refined. Now, the one area where most Chinese cars do feel a bit off compared to Europeans is in the wheel space over here, because while the body of the car actually looks pretty good, most of the time they have narrow and rather tiny wheels compared to the size of the car. Now, that's because the Chinese are a lot more pragmatic than us Europeans. We're okay with, you know, spending a couple more bucks, a couple more euros on fuel and having a car that's less fuel efficient, just to make sure that it looks actually better. Now, when it comes to the Chinese, they stick to smaller diameter wheels and narrower wheels just to save on fuel and make the car a lot easier to live with. Now, if you have smaller and narrower wheels, you will have lower fuel consumption, and changing the tires will probably not cost as much. That's why the Chinese are using this strategy on most of their cars. Now, if you're talking about the Tiggo 7, it depends on what kind of engine you go for. So if you're going for the ICE versions, you can choose between 17, 18 and 19-inch wheels. If you go for the plug-in hybrid, which is the one next to me, which is called Chery Super Hybrid, by the way, you only get the 18-inch wheels you see here. So that's an interesting choice. I am pretty sure that you can actually buy yourself a set of 19-inch wheels if these seem too small and fit them on the car. It will trade off some comfort and it will be more expensive, but if you want your car to look better, I think that's the way to go. Other than that, what can I say? The doors cover the door sills, so you won't get your trousers dirty if you're driving in weather like this, right? The doors are open quite wide and the rear end has a very interesting design with a light bar between the two tail lights. And yeah, I think this car actually looks pretty good. There are a number of trim choices available depending on whether you go for the ICE version or the plug-in hybrid. At least that's the case over here in Eastern Europe. I think they will vary from case to case, from market to market, but overall, if you go for the ICE version, you have 3 equipment lines. If you go for the plug-in hybrid, you have 2 of them, luxury and unique. We have the unique over here, which is about 3,000 euros more expensive. The luxury model starts at 35,000 euros. This one is 38,000 euros. And if we're talking about the extra features you get a panoramic sunroof, you get electrically adjustable seats with a memory function, you have a memory function for the side mirrors as well, you have lights on the sun blinds, you have tinted windows in the back, an electronically adjustable or opening tailgate, and I think that's about it. So yeah, there are a few, and the air quality management system inside for the climate control and the perfume option for the climate control. I'm going to show you what that is in a moment. So yeah, overall, not a lot of changes, and you might be wondering if that extra 3,000 euros is worth it. Now, let's pop the hood and talk about what's hiding under there. It's quite interesting that opening the hood requires a double tap of the lever inside the cabin, just like you see on BMW models. And once you pop it open, you will notice that there's a huge plastic cover over here covering up almost everything. You only have an opening for the washer fluid and for the cooling agent, right? So everything else is covered up. You do have struts over here, which is pretty good, and we have a very nice cover to keep the engine warm and isolated from the cabin in terms of noise. So what's hiding under the hood? Well, as I said, there are 2 versions of it, actually 3 versions available. There's an ICE version, pure without any hybridization, and there's this plug-in hybrid. Now, the ICE version uses an 1.6 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine with direct injection, timing chain, and a fixed geometry turbine that's able to make 147 horsepower and 275 Newton meters of torque. Now, that version is available with front-wheel drive or with all-wheel drive. No matter which version you go for, you will have a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox from Getrag. So Getrag, it's the same gearbox that's used on modern-day BMWs with transversely mounted engines, just to point that out. So people saying, you know, Chinese car manufacturers are using shit quality. Well, not exactly. If BMW is using it, it's probably a pretty good gearbox. Now, that version, as I said, comes with all-wheel drive if you want to. The all-wheel drive system on that car is made by Borg-Warner, which are some of the best in the business, and it is a Haldex type system. It's the same you will find on the JQ7. These cars use the exact same platform, right? So I presented the JQ7 earlier this year. You might want to check it out. Now, there's also a plug-in hybrid version like this one. This one uses a 1.5 liter turbocharged petrol engine. That's good for 143 horsepower, and it is not alone under the hood. It also has 2 electric motors at its side. There's an electric generator, and then there's an electric motor that actually powers the wheels. There's that's the most important part of this equation, because that motor has 204 horsepower and 310 Newton meters of torque. Together, according to Chery, these two can deliver up to 279 horsepower to the front wheels alone, unfortunately, and 310 Newton meters of torque at max. And that means sometimes the front wheels will get overrun, but we're going to talk about that later on. Now, in this plug-in hybrid version, you also have a transmission. It's called a DHT, dedicated hybrid transmission, that actually has one gear, and that is only meant to be used by the engine under the hood. So the engine can hook up to the wheels directly through that gear, but only at higher speeds, over 70 or 80 kilometers an hour. And that's to make this car a bit more efficient. So most of the time, you will be driving using the electric motor alone to power the car. Sometimes the ICE will kick in to send power to the wheels, or just to replenish the battery, to create energy and send it to the wheels. So this can be a series hybrid or a parallel hybrid, depending on the situation. Of course, being a plug-in hybrid, the Tiggo 7 also has a huge battery. It's not that big actually by today's standards. There's a battery under the floor that's about 18.4 kilowatt hours in total, and you can actually use about 75% of it, as experience has taught me. And they say this should give the car an electric range of 90 kilometers according to the NEDC cycle, but that's an old cycle. Nobody uses it anymore. In real life, I got about 60 kilometers of range out of a full charge, which is pretty good. And 45 kilometers of range until the ICE actually kicked in. Now, we're going to discuss how that's different later on. Now, depending on the model you go for, you will have independent suspension on all four corners of the car, or you will have a torsion beam at the back. Now, according to the Chery official specs, you get a torsion beam on the rear axle if you're getting the ICE version with 1.6 liter engine together with the front wheel drive setup. All other models get independent suspension at the back, which is kind of weird. I think that's a mistake in the technical details that are available online, but I didn't get to drive the ICE front wheel drive version yet to check out the rear suspension myself. That's just what Chery says on its website, but I think that's wrong, because it would be very costly to make the front wheel drive cars with a torsion beam on the back, and every single other version, you know, the ICE with four wheel drive or the plug-in hybrid with independent suspension on the rear axle. It's weird, but until I can prove otherwise, this is the official version I'm going with. Now, let's get back to the ICE engine for a moment, because we really can't really tell if this is going to be a reliable engine. It's too early to tell. We're going to need some time to see if there's any issues coming up, or if it turns out to be a, I don't know, unreliable engine. And it's quite okay for customers to be a bit reluctant. You know, it's comforting to get an engine or a car with an engine from a manufacturer you already know. That's not to say that, you know, Volkswagen engines haven't been faulty over the years. You know, you probably all know about the 2-liter petrol engine, the EA888, that used to drink a lot of oil. That's not to say that, you know, PSA didn't have any issues with the 1.2-liter PureTech engine, but a lot of people will choose an established manufacturer because they know what they're dealing with. You know, they have an idea as to their reputation. In this case, we don't have any idea how it will handle on the long term. However, we do know that the 1.5 and the 1.6 liter engines on these cars have been developed by AVL. Not a lot of people know about AVL, and that's understandable. We journalists do know about it because we've been writing about engines and car manufacturers for a long time. AVL is an engineering company that, you know, can design just around anything. They are focused on the automotive realm, and they have been designing engines for a lot of car manufacturers out there for a long time. So a car manufacturer can go to AVL, they can tell them, you know what, I need an engine with these specs, and they will make them for them. They will design it for them, and then another company will manufacture that engine. To get a better idea of what I'm talking about here, AVL was the mind, as a company, behind the legendary 1.9 liter TDI power units from Volkswagen. So they know what they're doing. And I'm mentioning those engines because they are the most widely known. But they have been behind a lot of other power units as well. So the recipe seems to be one for a reliable engine. Chery also stands behind its products with a 7-year, 150,000 kilometer warranty, so you should be fine overall. Even if anything goes wrong, they should be able to fix it without you paying for it. So yeah, that's about it. Let's go and check out the inside of this car before we set off on the road. Let's kick off the interior tour with the boot, which in this version, the unique version, comes with electrical opening. So this is the boot, 484 liters of space in this plug-in hybrid configuration. If you go for the ICE versions, you get more room, except on the all-wheel drive version, which does take up some room over here in the back, namely in the boot, right? But overall, I think you have enough room over here for most needs. You have anchor points, which is something you don't really see on all Chinese cars. Light for the rear, for the boot, and a power outlet. So that's pretty good. And the rear seats are foldable in a 60/40 configuration. That's not exactly great, but it's okay overall. Let's step inside. So over here we have a hard plastic finish, which is kind of odd. On the Tiggo 8 we didn't have a hard plastic finish. Over here we had the same as in the front, but that's interesting. We have a fake carbon fiber trim over here, which actually looks pretty good. Good quality plastic over here, and synthetic leather. Everything under this level is made out of synthetic leather, and we have plastic finish on the bottom over here, which is okay. You're gonna hit that with your feet anyway. These are the rear seats. Everything is done in fake leather, but it actually feels pretty nice to the touch. We have 2 anchor points over here for ISOFIX and over there. So you have, if you have child seats to use, these will be okay. Let's hop inside. As I said, the wheelbase of this car is 2.68 meters. So this is the amount of room a 6 feet tall person gets in the back of another 6 feet person sitting behind the wheel, because this seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position and yet pushed a bit further back because we have easy access on this car. So the seat will automatically slide back when you get out of the car to ease your access. Now, this actually feels pretty good. I like the fact that the seat backs are wrapped in this leather, and this feels actually pretty nice. Let's check the headroom. Plenty of headroom, no issues if you're 6 feet tall, and we do have the panoramic sunroof on this car that probably takes a bit of room over here on the sides, but actually I fit perfectly. We do have air vents over here, a USB-A charger, some storage space, and a transmission tunnel for the rear seats. Let's hop in the front. I like the way these doors sound. They sound really meaty, really strong. We have a different finish over here, as I mentioned already. This is a soft touch material. I think it's fake leather as well, but different from the one over here. So it feels really nice to the touch. The same carbon fiber trim over here, plastic, memory for the seats, 3 memory positions, the tweeter cover over here. So yeah, I like the fact that we have physical buttons for adjusting the rear view mirrors, which is pretty good. And these buttons for the window regulators do seem like they've been taken straight off a Mercedes-Benz. The material used over here is the same. We have a Sony sound system, which sounds pretty good. It's not excellent, but it's pretty good overall. Right, and this is the interior of the car. These are the front seats with the headrest integrated into the back seat, into the back of the seat. The materials are pretty good. They are quite comfortable overall, and they are electrically adjustable, heated and ventilated. In this trim level, on the luxury trim level, you don't get ventilated seats. The steering wheel is quite okay overall. We have physical buttons on the sides, really easy to use and intuitive. We do have stalks on the sides of the steering column, and let's start the car. The way to start it is just by pressing the brake, and the car automatically starts. This is a camera for the driver to make sure you're paying attention to the road, and Android Auto already connected to the car, right? So you can notice that we have a wireless connection, and it's projected on the whole width of the screen, 12.3 inches, 12.3 inches. And I actually like the round dials in this car. They look pretty good, and it's quite easy to understand what each button does, right? And I actually like this power reserve indicator. It reminds me of Rolls-Royce model. The resolution is pretty good, and the screens actually look pretty good themselves, right? This is a plus compared to the Tiggo 8 because we have some sort of physical buttons over here for certain climate functions, which I actually like. This is the key, pretty good and hefty. 2 cup holders over here, and this is a wireless charger for your phone, which actually looks pretty good. 2 USB connections as well, one for mirroring, one for charging. And actually the gear shift lever looks pretty good. It's electronic, and sometimes it has issues choosing a gear, right? So you have to give the car commands a number of times to switch from reverse to drive. Of course, it works now when I'm trying to prove a point, but in daily operation, sometimes it can get frustrating because the car won't switch from neutral to drive and so on. We have a driving mode selector over here, so you can go from eco to normal to sport. And it would be even nicer if you didn't have an audible warning whenever you switch. We do have a button over here for around view monitor, and I think the quality of the cameras is pretty good. You do have 360-degree cameras, and you also have a 3D projection of the car if you want to, right? So they are pretty okay. I've seen more expensive cars with worse cameras, and the carbon fiber theme continues over here on the dashboard. So overall, pretty good. Let me show you some interesting things about the car. So this is the AC menu, and you have a fragrance menu, right? You can choose from 3 different fragrances, and then you can choose just how strong they should be pumped into the car. Quite nice. It used to be only on premium cars that you get this kind of option, but it's nice to see it on this car as well. We do have another thing. It's this drop-down menu with very useful shortcuts, including the speed limit warning, right? So yeah, and I think this works pretty good. The Tiggo 8 has a more posh feeling in terms of the instrumented the multimedia system, but I think this is more ergonomic, and I prefer it to the Tiggo 8 overall. Oh yeah, and we also have a head-up display. Let's drive this car and check it out. So this is a plug-in hybrid, which means it will be mainly aimed at inner city usage and maybe, you know, short trips from the suburbs to inside the city and so on. So for a lot of people buying this car, my recommendation would be to use it as a plug-in hybrid. I've been saying this on all my videos featuring plug-in hybrids. You don't buy a plug-in hybrid if you don't intend to use one as such. What does that mean? It means that plug-in hybrids have been created to be used charged. That's why you have a big battery on board. That battery needs to be charged and used to get around. Otherwise, all you have is dead weight at the on board of your car, about 200 kilos of dead weight, right? If you don't want that, you probably should get a simple hybrid, not a plug-in. And I'm hoping the Tiggo 7 gets a hybrid version in the future. Now, as I said, this car should have a range of about 90 kilometers according to the estimates made by Chery themselves, but real life conditions will often lead to lower range, especially if we're talking about cold weather like we're experiencing right now and heavy traffic. So what I got was a theoretical range of about 60 kilometers with a full charge, which is pretty good still, but it's not up to 90 kilometers, which is the real claim. I got 60 kilometers theoretical, as I said, because I did about 30 kilometers with about 50% of the battery charge, and then I extrapolated from that. So if I did 50 kilometers, if I did 30 kilometers with 50% of the battery, I'm guessing you would be able to do 60 with a full charge. However, I noticed that once the car reaches 25% charge rate, the ICE, the engine under the hood, kicks in. Not necessarily to send power to the wheels, but to recharge the battery. So realistically, if you don't want to use any gasoline, any petrol, you would probably be looking at about 45 kilometers of full range, a fully electric range in these conditions. Now I am guessing that during summertime that range would increase, but it will depend on the way you're using the car and a lot of other aspects. How does the car feel though when driving it around town? Very zippy, because most of the time you're basically driving an electric car. Why is that? Because the car will be using the electric motor to get around most of the time. Even when the battery seems to be depleted, you will still be driving using the electric motor, while the ICE kicks in just to replenish the battery, right? And I like that. I like it because the car feels very zippy off the line because of that instant torque. So you can accelerate instantly, of course, as long as you maintain grip, because in these conditions, you know, getting any kind of grip could be a challenge all in itself. And that applies to acceleration and to deceleration as well. So when braking, you might want to be careful. But when you press hard on the gas pedal, the car does have a tendency to spin its wheels. So you might want to keep that in check. Otherwise, I'm guessing in better weather conditions and with different tires, I think this car is quite zippy off the line. It is still in these conditions, but it could be even better, and it feels very refined in the way it feels when you're driving it. It feels easy to drive. It's not a burden on your senses. You know, the steering is very light. Of course, you don't get a lot of feedback out of it, but it is light, and a lot of people appreciate that. They just wanted a car that's easy to drive, and I think this is one of them. So it will feel like an electric car most of the time. You will occasionally hear the engine under the hood kick in and, you know, doing its thing, but most of the time it's not even related to how hard you press on the go faster pedal. That's yet another plus. The ICE will do its thing under the hood and you will be able to drive. Now, I did notice a couple of things though. I did notice the fact that modulating the acceleration pedal is trickier in this car compared to the Tiggo 8. So in a number of driving scenarios, the go faster pedal in this car doesn't feel as direct as it felt in the Tiggo 8. It has a sort of delay in the way it delivers power. So the initial pickup is slow, but once you reach a certain threshold in the pedal travel, it accelerates at a faster pace than you would expect. It's quite weird. It has a rubber band feel. So let's say you accelerate like 5%, right? It doesn't really feel like it's doing much. And then if you stop accelerating at exactly 5%, so you move your right foot like this, right? You go like this. The first motion doesn't really translate into a hard acceleration. And then when you stop, the car starts accelerating. It's kind of weird. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes it does. So it's not all that predictable. The go faster pedal is not that predictable in certain scenarios. I also noticed that under hard acceleration, as I mentioned, sometimes you get you hit a sort of invisible wall. You hit a ceiling in the way the car accelerates. And that happens if you're driving in the initial driving mode, because this car has 3 driving modes related to the hybrid setup, right? Initial, smart, and forced. In initial, the car will try to run on electricity as much as possible. So if the battery is actually below 25%, between 25% and 16%, the car will still try to run on electricity. And you can do that, but you will hit a ceiling when accelerating at around 90 kilometers an hour. If you switch to smart mode, that doesn't happen, because the car will kick in the ICE to get more juice into the battery, and you won't get that you won't hit that ceiling. Of course, you should always drive in normal mode, not in eco mode. In eco mode, everything is toned down to sip as little electricity as possible, and that's not exactly doing anyone any favors. So I would stick to normal mode and smart in terms of the hybrid setup, and I think you should be good to go, because even in smart mode, the car will try to run on electricity as much as possible, but if you do need some extra push, it will start the ICE and get some juices flowing, right? So it works better in that mode, no matter how you look at it. If we're talking about the forced mode, that's basically the driving mode in which the car kicks in the ICE in order to recharge the battery. That's not exactly recommended, to be honest, and because it's not exactly efficient. But you can set a percentage for the battery between 30 and 80%, and you can use the ICE to recharge it. So that's yet another option. As for the fuel consumption, so let's say you're trying to use this car around town without recharging the battery. If you're using it as a regular hybrid, I saw an average fuel consumption of about 6.4 liters per 100 kilometers covered. But once again, that is not the recommended driving mode for this car. On the highway, I noticed that the car's behavior does change a little. Now, I was surprised to see that this is actually a bit more refined and quieter than the Tiggo 8 on the highway. The average noise recorded inside the cabin using my decibel meter was 77 decibels, which was lower than in the Tiggo 8, which was at 78. It's a different shape overall of the car, you know. The Tiggo 8 is a bit longer, so yeah, I probably expected that. We also have a blocked out grille up front on this car, which probably helps out with the noise. I'm not sure, but that could be something. And I also noticed that the intelligent cruise control system on the highway actually works best. I used it around town, I used it on the B roads, but on the highway I think it does its best jobs. And I think it's very reliant on the cameras of the car, and if you have clear markings on the sides, it can work great. If you don't, I think it uses the elements around you that can be easily recognizable. So I used the intelligent driving assistant on B roads, and over there I only had 2 lanes to use, right, on each way, and only the left hand side markings were clearly visible, and the car, I noticed, was occasionally trying to keep me very close to the markings, right? So that's my guess. My guess is that it's using the markings it can see to actually keep you in lane, and since it only had them on the left side, that's why it was pulling close to the left of the lane, right? So that's quite an interesting thing I noticed. Also in the corners, yeah, you don't want to accelerate too hard in the corners, especially if it's muddy out there like it is today. The car will spin its wheels. It actually spun its wheels right now, and I'm doing 90 kilometers an hour, and I'm in sport mode, right? Other than that, you know, keeping the highway speeds in check is not an issue on this car. You know, cruising at 130 kilometers an hour is easily done. You don't even hear the ICE under the hood. You know it's running all the time because there's a vibration in the car, but you don't really hear it at all. And that's quite nice overall. That's because the sound of the ICE is muffled out by the noise coming from the side windows, you know, the wind noise you usually get on the highway. It's not that this car is noisy, but that engine sound is blocked out. It doesn't really rev that much. You don't hear it inside the cabin, even when you're all out, you know, pressing all out on the gas pedal, on the go faster pedal. So it's quite an interesting approach. The car, when you accelerate, feels quite rubber bandy. So you press on the accelerator pedal, and it takes a while to actually feel the torque. The car starts accelerating after half a second, and I'm gonna prove it to you right now. I'm gonna slow down to 80 kilometers an hour. I'm gonna use normal mode.
Normal mode.
So I am slowing down to 80. Right, so right now we're maintaining 80 kilometers an hour, and I am going to accelerate now. Actually, this time it started going straight away, and 130, right? Let's go into sport mode. Try that acceleration again. So I'm keeping it at 80. Let's go. 90, 100, 110, 120, 130. So there's a small bit of lag, but I think it depends on the speed you're doing. It's quite interesting. It's not the same every time. But the main important thing is that it doesn't feel like a CVT. A lot of people are annoyed by how noisy and how much engines rev up in CVT cars. In this configuration, that doesn't really happen, and that's definitely a plus sign for a lot of people, right? As for the fuel consumption, with all my testing, acceleration runs, and so on and so forth, this car sipped an average of 7 liters per 100 kilometers covered on the highway, with the battery of course empty, but also while recharging said battery, because this instrument cluster actually shows me that, you know, the average fuel consumption is 7 liters per 100 kilometers covered, but at the same time there's a negative electricity consumption, which means the battery was actually recharged in the process. So quite an interesting approach, and quite an interesting figure from this car. Yeah, I think it actually could be used on the highways rather easily, but mind you, this is not a car that will excel in these conditions. This car was created mainly for inner city usage, you know, in the peri-urban areas, around towns, but not necessarily for longer trips. Of course, you can go on longer trips with it, but it's not going to be its main, I don't know, playing ground, the place where it will perform best. So what's the takeaway then about the Chery Tiggo 7, especially in this CSH version, the plug-in hybrid? Well, just like any other car out there, it has its ups and downs, its pros and cons. So buying one of these cars will definitely come with a huge discount compared to traditional car makers we're used to over here in Europe. That's not to say Chery is not a established car maker already. They've been making cars for about 30 years now, and for the last 20 years they've been the biggest exporters of passenger cars from China. However, for us Europeans, they are still a relatively new brand. They don't have the technology so thoroughly tested and proven over years by constant using as other companies are over here. So buying one of these compared to legacy car makers, let's call them, will definitely come at a discount. So I configured a Volkswagen Tiguan with the same specs as this car, you know, a plug-in hybrid. The Tiguan in plug-in hybrid version has 204 horsepower, this has 280, and I added all the options this car has, and I added them on the Tiguan, and the price for the Tiguan was 51,000 euros, whereas this one is 38 without any discount. So in certain markets, including this one, this car can actually be had for as low as 30,000 euros. In the luxury trim, not unique, so that's a huge price difference. You know, I checked the Hyundai Tucson. The Tucson is closer. It's about 42,000 euros in its luxury trim with the plug-in hybrid setup, right? So it is closer in terms of pricing to this one, but other car manufacturers are way out there in that regard. So yes, you will get a discount on this car if you decide to go for it. However, it does come with some risks, right? We don't really know how reliable these cars will be. You don't really know what happens in case of an accident or a fault of some kind. I'm sure there are plenty of well-trained technicians working at Chery right now, and I'm sure they will get the parts in time, but there's still an element of risk involved. You don't really know how much value this car will lose on the long term. So yeah, but if you're buying it as new, it's a pretty good deal. Of course, it's not perfect. As I mentioned in the video, there are some issues that can be fixed later on, but most of them are down to calibration points. They're not terrible things all on their own, and that could not be fixed by, you know, a software intervention or a better calibration of different sensors and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is my opinion of the Tiggo 7. I gave you real life range consumption figures, real life range results, the consumption figures and so on and so forth, so you can actually get a better idea about it before trying it out. My advice to you is, don't take my word for it, go and test it out yourself and then make a decision if you're interested in buying such a car. This has been my review of the Tiggo 7. Until next time, of course, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to keep this channel alive. Ciao and see you on the next video.